The line of progression, remember how we, our patellotendon bar and our popliteal fossa, we wanted them to be parallel like this, right? So what I'm going to do is look, now what I want those two lines, those two planes should be parallel with the floor. That's going to put my cast in the line of progression, okay? So what I'm going to do is look down here in that flattened off area. Also, can somebody grab me 2 tongue depressors?
Is it just have to hold it for the way you're holding it? Exactly. Yeah.
Right behind you, Joe.
Okay, so sometimes it's helpful to take a couple of tongue depressors. So basically what I'm doing here is I have 2 thumb depressions, right? And so I'm kind of imagining this as a line that would connect those 2 points. Okay, so I have that horizontal line, and then if I go underneath and I put this on my popliteal fossa, I hope that they're approximately parallel to each other, and then I want to position the cast so that those are also parallel with the floor. Okay, so that's the first thing. So the method that I use to do this, step 1, put it in the line of progression. Then we're gonna work on our AP first, then our ML, and then we'll work on the distal portion of the cast. Okay, so you can also kind of do this by feel. If you place your hands back the way they were on your cast and you feel that flattened off area, you can kind of just rotate it until it feels like that is parallel with the floor. Once it is, then I'm going to lock my cast in place so it's not going to move on me. The next thing I'm going to do is, so for this cast it won't really matter much, but I'm going to do this step anyway because it will matter very significantly when you're doing an actual patient, is I want to measure my length. Okay, so the length of my residual limb from my patellotendon to the end, and then also to the bone end. If I took both of those measurements, I would want to take both of those lengths. The purpose is because I need to make sure this patellotendon goes in the right spot. Let's say that I made this patellotendon, I didn't measure length, and I just kind of guessed, and maybe my cast was not perfectly accurate to the patient's length, and I cut in my patella bar too low. What's going to happen then is the patient's distal end of their residual limb is going to hit the end of the socket before they actually get suspended by that patellotendon bar. So they're going to have distal end pressure. They're also going to have a bunch of pressure right on top of their tibia from that patellotendon bar. So the length is really important. Better to err on the side of too long than too short. Okay? We can always add a pad under the bottom if you have a little bit of a gap and take up that space. So that's easier to correct than a socket that is too short. So we already know we only did 5 inches for this project, and when you work with your patient model, you're going to have different lengths, and so that will be important to check. So I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. So there's my 5 inches here. So I'm saying that's where the end of my bone is, the end of the tibia, and then that's going to be where my patellotendon is. This is also my 0 point. So if I'm doing my circumferences, I took a measurement every 1 inch, so that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for my circumferences. So I can go ahead and mark those on there. Next thing I want to do is reinforce my my landmarks, my bony landmarks. So I'm going to make sure my marks transferred over and just reinforce them on my cast so I know exactly where everything is. So I'm going to retrace my patella, my tibial tubercle, the crest of the tibia, distal end of the tibia, lateral border, medial flare, and fib head. Okay? So those are my bony landmarks that I want to be aware of. Those are my pressure sensitive areas that I need to avoid. So the next thing is going to be starting with my patellotendon bar. Actually, you know what, before I do that, I'm just going to clean up this cast a little bit because I've got some artifact going on here that's not really part of it. So that was just from the seam, the plaster. Also don't like all this gunk on top. So I'm going to use my foam round right on that mark that I made, so that 0 mark. Now when I cut this in, I want to make sure that my sure form is parallel with the floor. So I'm not cutting it at an angle either way. I'm also not cutting at an angle this way. So my sure form is perpendicular to my cast and parallel with the floor. Okay. So I'm just going to cut straight across about the depth of my fingers. So this is why pushing hard on that patella tendon when you're casting is important because it tells you the depth that you can go in on this patella tendon bar. So that's almost the depth of the full round. So I got kind of these sharp edges here on either side where I cut in, so I don't want to have any sharp corners or sharp edges. Everything should be rounded off. So I'm just going to round this around the patella. And then remember, we have about an inch and a half of space here between the patella and the tibial tubercle where we can make this patella bar. So I can actually take that little hump of plaster off, and that's still just going to be pushing on the patella tendon. Shouldn't really be impinging on any bony anatomy yet. Okay, the reason for the quarter is the radius of that curve should be about the same radius as a quarter. So I have a little bit of a gap under there still, so I need to take off a little more material down here so that the quarter will fit perfectly in there.
That quarter's gonna get very popular.
Okay, so that's pretty close. The other thing that you can see is we have a couple little bumps here on either side. So in a true PTB, this is pretty much it. This would be your patella tendon bar. Since we're kind of doing a hybrid design, I like to kind of wrap around the patella a little bit. So I'm going to extend my patella tendon bar. Just going to bring it up on either side just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to blend in this area on either side.
Not as deep though?
Not as deep, so it should just, yep, it should be just blending out.
Vad ska du säga, Steffi? Well, you're good, you know.
Dude, you'll get to do it in just a minute. Okay, so next thing, I'm going to do one more step and then you guys are going to go do this, okay? So the next thing, I've got my patella tendon bar. So I need to work on my AP dimension. That's the first thing that we're going to do. So I need to now check that against what I measured and then do some modifying to the posterior aspect possibly. So what I like to do also is redraw that 0. So if you need to use your tape measure to get that back. So I've got my 1 inch and my 0. I like to take that's my MTP, right? That's right through the patella tendon. So I like to bring that all the way around to the posterior aspect. Make sure you draw a straight line. One thing that's helpful is I've done this like 100 times, 100 million times, so it's easy for me to draw that straight line, but it can be a little bit hard to visualize, so if you take a rubber band and put it on there and then make sure it's straight, and then that can help you to draw your line. So the reason I like to have that line going all the way around is it's gonna help me figure out my posterior trim line. Remember how I said that the middle of that posterior trim line needs to be no less than a 1/4 inch lower than MTP. So this is giving me MTP level, just transposing it onto the posterior aspect so I can see where that should go. So at this point, I also like to kind of draw a rough trim line to help me know where I need to modify. So through the mid-patella, middle of the patella, and then I'm just going to estimate 2.5 inches proximal to MTP. Go up, it's going to dip back down. This is my lateral side here, so I got my fib head. So remember that W shape, the medial hamstring relief is greater than the lateral. So this one's just going to dip. I'm going to dip down just a little bit below MTP level. And in the middle, bring it back up. So that's about 1/4 inch under MTP. And then the medial side, I'm going to dip down just a little bit lower than the lateral. And then back up. And then the ears should basically just match. I'm going to have to clean all this up because I've got a lot of extra plaster going on. there. And I'll probably have to add some plaster in a couple places. Okay, so next step. So now that I've brought that across, so it looks like where I placed my hands when I was compressing in that popliteal fossa is a little bit low because really this is where that guitar pick shape is going to be, and so the deepest point of that should be right there. So I'm going to have to remove quite a bit of material to bring this down, most likely. But let's take a measurement right now so I can have something objective to look at. So my measurement is going to go from that point. That's where the deepest point should be. It's not there yet, but I'm going to still take my measurement from there, and then to the deepest part of that patella tendon area that I already carved out. Okay. So. That.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm at 5 1/4 right now, and I measured my AP at 3 1/2. So that's, I gotta take down a lot, right? If I measured it from here, it'd probably be a lot closer, but I need to remove a lot of plaster here and bring this down to that depth where my hands were. So I'm gonna wind up removing quite a bit of material. I'm actually gonna take like all this off. I want to just flatten off this area. Even though this isn't really going to be in my socket, this will be outside of the trim line. It's helpful for me to just get rid of it in order to do what I need to down here. So again, put it back into the line of progression. So if you were to have this at a slight angle and then flatten this off, now your anterior and your posterior are no longer going to be parallel to each other. So you need to put it back into the line of progression. So making sure that this is parallel to the floor, right? And patella tendon area is parallel to the floor. And then